Hi folks, Canadian Prepper here. So many of you have been anticipating this video for a while. My interview with Marcus from Prison Talk, Life After the Penitentiary's channel. Go and check him out on YouTube. Click the subscribe button. Go and subscribe to this guy. Excellent channel, especially if you want to know how things work on the inside. If you have any questions with regards to how things work inside a federal penitentiary, this is the guy to ask. He did 10 years. And he came out unscathed, and he's got a lot of stories to tell, and he's got a lot of information to share that might be useful. Now, I first off want to say that there's going to be some profanity in this video. And I'm not sure what it is with some people who are so easily triggered by profanity. Now, you know I don't use a lot on this channel. Mainly that's because of YouTube's restrictions with regards to restricting the videos so that not many people can see them if you use a lot of cuss words. So it's not that I'm offended in any way. Things like that don't offend me. But I want to say this, that if you're offended by things like words, verbal utterances, then imagine how offended you're going to be at the grim reality of a without rule of law situation, in a no-holds-barred situation where people are doing heinous things, where you're probably going to have to face some real violence. What are you going to do in that situation? Are you going to be offended when the person who's trying to kick in your door is swearing, or are you going to be more concerned with dealing with that situation and addressing it? So the first part of this video, and this is going to be a many-part series, you guys are going to really like this. Those of you who are diplomatic and who are open to hearing other perspectives that perhaps you don't agree with, you're going to get a lot from this series, I guarantee you. And the first question I asked Marcus was to do with his background. Tell us a bit about where he came from. This is an opportunity for you to learn from someone who, to many of you, at least in his past life, might have been your boogeyman. It's time to demystify this lifestyle, and it's also time to make ourselves aware of the fact that we're not, as preppers, the only people who think about this stuff, that everybody has an opinion about this stuff. So without further ado, let's hear what Marcus has to say about where he's from and where he's going.
What's up, everybody? My name is Big Hurt, and I'm down with Fresh Out, Life After the Penitentiary. You want to know about my background? I've been to juvenile hall, I've been to California Youth Authority, and I've been to the federal pen. I started off when I was 14 years old selling crack. I got caught a case, did roughly 6.5 months in juvenile hall. After that, went back to school, was doing good for a little while, and then got caught up again helping out a homeboy in a home invasion. I caught the home invasion. I ended up getting 3 years. I did 2 years, 8 months off of that in California Youth Authority. Also spent some time in fire camp while I was in Youth Authority, you know, because of my good behavior, and they offered me the opportunity, so I took advantage of it. But I still had the gangster's mentality. So upon leaving YA, I kind of got involved in the adult entertainment industry, was doing my thing, AKA as Big Hurt. You can look me up, I'm the truth. Anyways, I did that for a little while, but I was still hustling, mixed up in the game, selling drugs, selling guns, robbing, doing what I had to do. And I ended up getting mixed up with some other guys, and I caught a bank robbery case. Had a high-speed chase. It was a hostile takeover, you know, probably about 10 cop cars, helicopters. It was raining, you know, spike stripped the whole nine. I ended up jumping out the car, jumping over the freeway, got arrested on the side of the highway, and that was the last time I seen the streets for roughly 120 months. After 120 months they gave me in the feds, I ended up doing 8 years, 8 months. But upon getting sentenced in the feds, I really started thinking about my life. You know, because of my criminal history, they sent me to USP Lompoc, which is one of the oldest USPs in the state. And they call it the castle, and it wasn't no joke. The average guy there was doing 15 years or better, and on the average had already been down 10 years or more. So there was a lot of serious guys up in there. You know, they had a guy up in there, he had got caught up and he had 5 life sentences, plus 100 years. So imagine that. So even if you get the time off, you still got another 4 life sentences plus 100 years to try to fight. But it was crazy, you know, and that really made me think about my life and how I got there. And you know, things don't happen overnight. You build up momentum to get to a certain place in your life. And I have built up momentum, which led me to being in the federal penitentiary, you know, with people who were never gonna go home. You know, in their mind, they maybe had an idea that they could possibly get out, but the reality was, a lot of those guys were gonna spend the rest of their life in the pen because they didn't know anything about the law and they didn't have any resources, and because they were fucked. So while I was in the federal penitentiary in Lompoc, USP, I started reading a lot of material about like life, meditation, spirituality, and I just changed the way I looked at things. You know, I had to reprogram myself. Basically, I stripped down everything I had learned, everything I had been taught, and recreated my whole demeanor, my mentality, the way I looked at things. I just redefined myself. And it was a process, and it wasn't without friction. You know, a lot of guys used to, you know, get mad at me because they see me studying all the time, and I didn't hang out on the yard. I wouldn't like, you know, doing a lot of the stupid shit that was going on in there, but I had to work on myself. So throughout that 8 years, I gradually perfected my character as reinventing who I was as a human being. And that allowed me to get out and focus and be successful. You know, a lot of people, they become institutionalized. They get into the pen, they call themselves convicts, they call themselves inmates, you know, they participate in a lot of the bullshit, the politics, the racism. You know, I didn't ever consider myself an inmate or a convict. And I had friends in there from all walks of life. I had Korean friends, a friend from Belize, you know, a white friend from Seattle, you know, a mixed friend from Alaska. I had, you know, Mexican friends from Sacramento. I had a lot of diversity in my crowd, and like I said, it allowed me to further myself culturally and also benefit from just having those relationships. So when I got out, I took advantage of all that I learned, and it opened up a lot of doors for me. I didn't have a lot of issues transitioning back into society as far as with the jailhouse mentality. I was far from being institutionalized. I never, you know, got comfortable in prison. I never acted like that was my home. I never buffed the floors in there. I never, you know, a lot of guys buff the floor. They polish their sinks in there. They polish their toilet. It's like, man, this is government shit. I never bought into any of that. I knew I was there for one purpose, and that was to get the fuck out. And that's what I did. And while I was in there, I came up with the concept Fresh Out, and I wrote down notes, and I just held on to that dream. And I said, when I get out, I'm gonna come up with a show that's gonna show people what it's about for a person getting out of prison who's been through the system. Not the guys who were in the prison yelling through the food tray rack, or the guys who are, you know, walking around being tough. I'm talking about guys who have been out, because a lot of those guys who are tough guys in prison, they can't make it on the street. You know, too much pressure for them. So I got out, and opportunity presented itself. I met my business partner, and together we brainstormed and we created Fresh Out. And that was roughly 5 years ago. And here we are today, still producing the show. Got over 270 videos. We're one of the biggest prison shows on YouTube. And we motivate a lot of people from around the world. You know, I don't glamorize this shit. I don't brag about having done all the time I've done in my life. You know, I wish I would have never spent a decade of my life fucking around in a cage like an animal. You know, I wish I would have maybe pursued college or did a trade or did something else, you know, but it is what it is, you know, and there's a purpose behind it, and I found that purpose. And that purpose is to educate the public on just the mentality of a person who's been in prison, the potential in a person who's been in prison, and what real change could really result in. So I'm sharing with you guys Fresh Out, me and my partner. We got another series called Prison Talk, and we just keep it real. We're not bragging about this shit, and I don't want to endorse kids going to prison or going to jail, because ain't nothing cool about it, and ain't nothing fly about having somebody have control of your total self. I mean, everything from squatting and coughing to lifting up your ball sack to when you can eat, you know, when you can sleep. Ain't nothing cool about that. I'm Big Herc, and this is Fresh Out, Life After the Penitentiary.
So the first question I asked Marcus ado with disaster preparedness was, if there was some major disaster, like a nuclear conflict with another country, widespread terrorist attacks, major San Andreas quake, etc., and a large part of society as we know it collapse, what do you think would happen to the prisoners in these institutions? Would they be released or left to perish? If left to perish, would family, friends, or even gang affiliations attempt to rescue them? So let's hear what he had to say.
You know, being in the pen, you got a lot of things that go through your mind. And I remember me and my cellie, we used to talk about what would happen if there was like a natural disaster, or if something major happened in society which caused just a catastrophe. You know, what would actually go down? And I know that the guards have a protocol that they're supposed to do. And a lot of times, like say if there's a riot or something, they lock it down. But if there was a natural disaster, I think the inmates would actually step their game up. Some of them. You got a lot of motherfuckers who are just, they've been domesticated. So they become docile. So they'd probably wait to see, you know, what would happen and, you know, wait for maybe somebody to come help them. But then you got guys who are proactive. You know, they're actionists. And these are felons or inmates or convicts or whatever you want to call them, who take things into their own hand. And I think if there was like an earthquake or a war or something like that, these guys wouldn't be down with the locking it down situation. They wouldn't lock it down. And I think even some of the guards in that situation would just try to get the fuck out of there. They wouldn't really give a fuck about locking down the inmates to a degree, because they know that there is going to be no more supplies being brought in, or food, or just resources. And at that point, it's every man for himself. So I think a lot of guys would actually, you know, based on having done survival through lockdowns and shit like riots, I think motherfuckers would just go hard in the paint. And what I mean by hard in the paint, they would take matters into their own hands, you know. They would, you know, get a hold of a guard, you know, because a lot of inmates, you know, they got game, and they have relationships with, you know, the guards and, you know, some of the staff, and they would get access to the keys and get the fuck up out of there, man, because there would really be no reason if there was, say, some type of fallout for people to be locked up, and everybody's trying to go home and take care of their families and get the fuck out of there anyways. So, you know, these guards, they would pretty much be like, fuck it, man, if you guys can make it up out of here, it's on you. And we'd be on some Mad Max shit. You know, you get whatever, put your boots on, you grab whatever you can grab as far as in your knapsack, whatever, you know, food you need. Because in prison, you're taught to eat with nothing. And what I mean by that is there's places where you don't have a microwave. You don't have access to, let's say, fire or things like that. So you have to make all this stuff. You can take guys that get a stinger, and a stinger is a prison-made heating device, and attach it to a battery from a Walkman, and they'll use that to like cook over some foil to heat up meats. So, you know, there's a lot of things you learn in prison, you know, prison shanks, you know, things that you can use for when you are out in case you got to survive. And like I said, the guys who work out every day, the guys who read a lot, the guys, you know, who are, you know, you got some guys in there who have been in the military, who are ex-military, so they know how to survive. And you got gang members who aren't, you know, really the docile type and who are, you know, progressive. And these guys make shit happen. And so, you know, there'll be a large number of people who would actually be the ones to lead the pack. And you would have the other guys who are maybe the white collar guys, you know, guys in there for credit card fraud, bank fraud, you know, guys maybe who aren't really street guys. They would probably wait to see what happens, because they would be scared to get more time, or they would think that maybe somebody would come rescue them. You know, I really don't have it too played out unless you got somebody who's a rider for you on the street, which a lot of guys have family members who come to visit them as far as coming to rescue you. And it would most likely be people, you know, gang members partnering up. And, you know, you would have, you know, Crips and Bloods from the same city, or maybe, you know, Vice Lords and GDs, you know, dudes who have resources partner up to get out of there, because they know that they're dependent on each other for survival. So a lot of things will change. I mean, you know, when you have a situation where every man is for himself, people look at it differently. You know, it's just like when there's a riot or when there's a situation with the institution and inmates have to come together. You'll have, you know, the shot caller for the ABs, or, you know, shot caller for the Serranos or Norteños or the Crips or Bloods or the Nation. They'll sit down and work out a solution or work out an answer for that. So it would be the same thing if there was a major catastrophe. I got these shot callers getting together and basically putting the people in order, you know, putting them in check, and everybody would, you know, basically formulate accordingly. And you got some, like I said, some guys who would be in the front, some guys who'd be waiting in the back. But guys in prison, the ones who know what's up, they would know how to survive. They wouldn't be sitting around begging and crying and, you know, waiting for somebody to come rescue them. They'd get the fuck up out of there. And especially guys in the feds who are doing multiple life sentences, these guys are waiting for an opportunity like that to get home to their people. So it'd be going down in the federal penitentiary.
So I'm just going to point out some of the things that Marcus said, which I didn't think about before he said them, and which I think are important, because I think a lot of people have this idea that all prisoners are a major threat to society, in the sense that they're, you know, after being encaged for so long, that they're going to have the psychological wherewithal to immediately just be thrust into a full-blown anarchic situation where there is no rule of law. Something to keep in mind is that a lot of these people, as Marcus said, are institutionalized, and so because of that, there's such a strict routine, their survival depends on such a strict routine, that many of them are going to be so conditioned and so domesticated, as he said, that they're not going to be able to really adapt to a world with absolutely no rules, when their entire life is governed by rules from start to finish, from the beginning of the day to the end of the day, the most strictest and harshest of rules. Now, he also talks about those people who aren't institutionalized. You know, he talks about like the go-getter types, the ones who move into more leadership positions, maybe the ones that demonstrate less docile, more alpha male characteristics. These guys are going to find a way to weasel their way out of the prison by using people on the inside to get out. You know, guards, support workers, counselors. And he also talks about family members from the outside. And I think that's another thing that a lot of people underestimate when it comes to prisoners. I've heard a lot of people say, oh, well, you know, if the shit ever hit the fan in a big way, that all of these prisoners are just going to be massively executed or left to rot in their prison cells. But you got to remember, I mean, all locks can be broken. And there's going to be family members who are still seeking out their people. You know, I mean, just because you stole a car doesn't mean your family is going to reject you. You know, you're still going to have a lot of people who want to make sure that you're all right. So, you know, are those people going to risk going into that situation where, you know, it's going to be a very dangerous situation for you to go and try to break somebody out of prison, especially after a without rule of law scenario? So, and how successful that might be, it might be a total foobar situation if it was attempted. But something to consider, man. These are the things that a lot of people don't think about. And another thing I always say, a lot of people say, well, yeah, they're just going to go and start putting bullets in people. But you got to consider that the relationship between the guards and the prisoners isn't as polarized as a lot of people think in some cases. And in addition to that, a lot of guards, a lot of people in general, aren't capable of that sort of mass slaughter without severe psychological repercussions. Now, you can go through history and you can cite certain things, but even, you know, in the gas chambers, you know, they had to do it in a way which was more remote and far removed. So you couldn't just have the indiscriminate killing of people over and over again. I don't think you'd find a lot of people who are able to do that. You might find some psychopathic workers who were willing to partake in that wholesale slaughter and then enjoy it. But then you have to think of the other point he made about the fact that, you know, if crap is hitting the fan, are you going to stand your post, or are you going to go AWOL, especially in a situation like that? When you know that, you know, things are getting really bad all around you, are you going to be sitting there working in a jail trying to keep law and order in that jail when there's your family on the outside who's struggling to survive? You know, I mean, it's pretty obvious. I've talked about how a lot of police would probably go AWOL. A lot of first responders, military personnel are probably going to go AWOL when the shit hits the fan. If it hits the fan in a big way over large scale areas where, you know, there's just not going to be any more documentation, where it's going to be so prolonged that the institutions aren't going to come back. And if they do come back, they're essentially going to be reset, because all of the documentation and records that were kept on everybody are basically going to be put back to zero. Another great point he makes is about the flexibility and the mental agility of prisoners. In order to do things, they had to be MacGyvers in a way, you know, in order to light fires, in order to light their cigarettes, little things like that. And they do teach you a lot, because it teaches you to work with very little to accomplish what you need to do in order to perhaps not survive, but in their case to have some sort of comfortable level of existence above and beyond just mere survival. A lot of people underestimate the scarcity of resources that prisoners have to deal with, and how they're basically used to living with a lot less than everybody else. You know, they're used to wearing one set of clothes a day. What's going to happen in a crap hits the fan situation? You'll be lucky if you have a set of clothes. You know, fashion is not going to be a thing. You know, you're just eating your calories, basically. The prison food, as far as I know, isn't that good. It's just calories. You know, the entertainment in some of these prisons is pretty bare bones. There's not a whole lot to do. You have to make do with very little. And that's what a post-collapse world would look like. It's making do with very little. You don't have all the novelty that lots of the decadent people who have never been on the inside that we enjoy, right? We enjoy all this novelty, all this freedom, all this stuff that we've gotten used to. Prisoners aren't used to that, so that gives them a bit of an edge in that respect anyways, in terms of survivability. Another thing he doesn't mention, but he may mention it in future videos, is patience. You know, having to sit in a cell for 23 hours a day, who would be more perfectly suited to do time in an underground bunker, you know, while SHTF blew over, than a prisoner who's been in prison for many years and is used to that environment, used to being patient, used to waiting it out, you know? So that's another strength of prisoners, is that they're going to have that advantage of, they're going to be able to stall people out, to wait people out. And when he's talking about these go-getters, you know, he's talking about how a lot of people have military training. There's a lot of people who have been through U.S. military basic training. Now, I don't know exactly what that affords you in terms of survival skills and how much of that you'd really retain, but it just adds to that potential resourcefulness that prisoners have. You know, a lot of gang members go into the military, are sent into the military by their shot callers to get the training that the military affords, so they can bring back that training and integrate that into their criminal activities. Another thing he briefly hints at is the self-governance of the prison, and how, you know, the different shot callers would get together potentially and try to work out some sort of solution. And I seen a documentary on how in some prisons, like in third world countries, it's really the prisoners who are running the show. Order is maintained through the prisoners. All right, so we're going to end part one of this series here, but stay tuned for future installments, because we got a lot more questions that Marcus is going to answer for us on the channel. And I'm not trying to be stingy with the, you know, how much I show at once in every part of the series. It's just that I want to make sure that I'm able to get my responses in there. And a lot of people don't have time to watch 20-30 minute long videos, so it is what it is. So this series may be rather lengthy. Anyways, I want you to go and subscribe to Fresh Out Life After the Penitentiary. This guy deserves a sub. You know, if anything, you know, maybe you can learn something for somebody else in your family. With something like 3% of the American population incarcerated, or I think it's 1%, 3 million people, chances are you probably know somebody who's behind bars and could benefit from some of the advice that he has to offer. So go and check it out. Thanks for watching. Don't forget to like, comment, subscribe. Stay tuned for the next installment of the series, which will probably be coming out in a few days. I'm going to space them out a few days apart. Canadian Prepper out.